The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite, each drop a staccato beat against the glass that seemed to echo the coldness within. Marcus Ashford stood with his back to the room, hands clasped behind him, surveying the city that sprawled beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered through sheer will and ruthlessness. At 38, he commanded an empire worth $40 billion, built from the ashes of his father's failed ventures and his own relentless ambition. "Your wife is here to see you." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Marcus didn't turn around. "Tell her I'm busy." "Sir, she says it's important." "Everything is always important to Eleanor," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Tell her to make an appointment like everyone else." He heard the door open anyway, followed by the click of heels on marble. Eleanor Ashford, his wife of 3 years, stood in the doorway of his home office, her elegant frame wrapped in a cream cashmere coat. She was beautiful in the way that old money bred, refined features, perfect posture, hair that fell in a calculated cascade of honey-blonde waves. She was everything his social standing required, and nothing his heart had ever wanted. "I'm not one of your employees, Marcus," Eleanor said, her voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "You can't schedule me out of your life." "Can't I?" He finally turned to face her, his expression carved from ice. "I seem to recall our marriage contract specifying limited personal interaction. You have your life, I have mine. That was the agreement." Eleanor's jaw clenched. Their marriage had been a business arrangement from the start. Her family's political connections merged with his financial power. They both entered it with open eyes, knowing it was a strategic alliance rather than a love match. But Eleanor had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that something more might develop. 3 years later, she knew better. "My sister is arriving tomorrow," Eleanor said, lifting her chin. "She's staying with us for a few months while she completes her research project here in the city. I wanted to inform you as a courtesy." "Your sister?" Marcus's lip curled slightly. "The one who's been gallivanting around the world studying butterflies or some such nonsense?" "Sophia studies environmental conservation and endangered species," Eleanor corrected, color rising in her cheeks. "She has a doctorate from Oxford and has published groundbreaking research on ecosystem preservation. But I wouldn't expect you to understand the value of anything that doesn't generate profit." "How refreshingly naive," Marcus said, returning his attention to his computer screen. "She can stay in the guest wing. I won't be disturbed by her presence, I trust." "You're never disturbed by anyone's presence because you're never here," Eleanor shot back. "Don't worry, Marcus. We'll continue our parallel lives without intersection. That's what you want, isn't it?" He didn't answer, and after a moment, Eleanor left, the door closing with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Marcus stared at the screen without seeing it, his jaw tight. He'd learned long ago that caring about people was a liability. His mother had abandoned him when he was 7. His father had drunk himself to death, leaving Marcus with nothing but debts and broken promises. Every business partner who'd seemed like a friend had eventually tried to betray him. Love was a fairy tale, marriage a contract, and emotions were weaknesses to be controlled or eliminated. He'd built his empire on this philosophy, and he wasn't about to change now. The next evening, Marcus returned to the penthouse later than usual, having deliberately scheduled meetings to avoid the sisters' arrival. It was nearly 10 when he stepped through the door, loosening his tie as he headed toward his private quarters. He could hear voices from the main living area, Eleanor's carefully modulated tones and another voice, lighter, more animated. He should have kept walking. He had no interest in meeting Eleanor's sister, no desire to make small talk or pretend at family warmth. But something about that second voice made him pause, made him turn toward the living room despite his better judgment. She was standing by the window, her back to him, pointing at something in the city lights below. Where Eleanor was all sharp angles and controlled grace, this woman moved with an unconscious fluidity, her dark hair falling in loose waves down her back. She wore jeans and a soft green sweater, her feet bare on the marble floor as if she'd already made herself at home. The migration patterns are completely disrupted by the light pollution, she was saying, her voice carrying genuine distress. These buildings, as beautiful as they are, they're death traps for birds. Millions die every year just in this city alone because they can't navigate properly. There are solutions, simple ones, but nobody implements them because it would cost money or dim the pretty lights. Eleanor noticed Marcus first. "Oh, you're home. Marcus, this is my sister, Sophia." The woman turned, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest, like a key turning in a lock he hadn't known existed. Sophia Winters was beautiful, but not in Eleanor's cultivated way. Her beauty was natural, unadorned. Golden brown eyes that seemed to catch light, a dusting of freckles across her nose, full lips that curved easily into a smile. But it was her expression that struck him most. Open, genuine, completely without the guarded calculation he saw in every face around him. "Mr. Ashford," she said, crossing the room with her hand extended. "Thank you for allowing me to stay here. I promise to be as unobtrusive as possible." Her hand was warm in his, her grip firm. He found himself holding it a moment too long before dropping it abruptly. "It's no trouble," he heard himself say, his voice rougher than intended. "The penthouse is large enough. Your wife mentioned you're rarely here anyway," Sophia said with disarming directness, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "So I suppose we'll be like ships in the night." "Sophia," Eleanor said sharply, her cheeks flushing, but Sophia just laughed, a sound like wind chimes that seemed completely out of place in the cold elegance of the penthouse. "What? You did say that. I'm just being honest. I appreciate honesty. Don't you, Mr. Ashford?" Marcus found himself caught in her gaze, those golden brown eyes seeming to see past his carefully constructed walls. No one looked at him like this, without fear, without calculation, without wanting something. She looked at him as if he were simply another person, not Marcus Ashford, billionaire titan, not someone to be used or avoided, just a man. "I do," he said quietly. "It's a rare commodity. Only because so few people are brave enough to practice it," Sophia replied, tilting her head slightly. "Fear makes liars of us all, don't you think?" Eleanor cleared her throat. "Sophia, you must be exhausted from your flight. Why don't I show you to your room?" "Actually, I'm wide awake. Time zones, you know." Sophia turned back to the window. "Is it always this noisy? The city, I mean, I've been living in remote field stations for so long. I'd forgotten what constant sound feels like." "You'll get used to it," Eleanor said. "Or maybe I'll learn to love it," Sophia countered. "Every place has its own music, right? This is just louder than most." Marcus realized he was still standing there, still watching her, when he should have excused himself minutes ago. "I should let you settle in," he said abruptly. "Welcome to New York, Dr. Winters." "Sophia, please," she said, flashing him another smile. "Dr. Winters makes me sound like I should be prescribing medication instead of trying to save tree frogs." He nodded and left, but as he walked to his room, he could still hear her voice, could still see those eyes that looked at him without judgment. It unsettled him in a way he couldn't name, and Marcus Ashford did not like being unsettled. Over the next week, Marcus found himself breaking his usual patterns. He came home earlier. He ate breakfast in the penthouse instead of at the office. He told himself it was coincidence, a temporary disruption in his routine that would soon normalize. He didn't acknowledge, even to himself, that he was seeking glimpses of the woman who had invaded his home and somehow begun to invade his thoughts. Sophia was everywhere and nowhere. She didn't try to interact with him, didn't seek him out or seem to notice his modified schedule. She was simply present, curled up on the couch with research papers and her laptop, taking conference calls about conservation projects, leaving books about ecology on the coffee table. She treated the penthouse not like a museum to be preserved but like a home to be lived in, and somehow it felt more alive with her in it. One morning, Marcus emerged from his room at 7 to find her standing on the balcony in the early light, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, binoculars trained on the sky. "You're up early," he said, stepping outside despite the chill. She didn't startle, didn't turn around. "Migration season," she said simply. "Warblers passing through." They rest in Central Park. The ones who make it that far, there was sadness in her voice. So many don't. Marcus moved to stand beside her, following her gaze upward. Because of the buildings. Because of human arrogance, she corrected gently. We build these monuments to ourselves without considering the cost to everything else. Every action has consequences, Mr. Ashford. We just choose not to see most of them. Marcus, he said. She lowered the binoculars, turning to look at him. What? Call me Marcus, not Mr. Ashford. A slow smile spread across her face. All right then, Marcus. Would you like to see? She handed him the binoculars and pointed. There at about 2 o'clock. See the small brown bird with the yellow throat. He adjusted the focus, finding the bird she meant. It was tiny, unremarkable to his untrained eye. I see it. That's a Connecticut warbler, Sophia said, her voice warming with enthusiasm. It's actually quite rare to spot one. They're extremely shy, usually stay hidden in dense vegetation. That little bird flew here from South America, thousands of miles, weighing less than half an ounce. It's one of the most incredible journeys on Earth, and it happens twice a year, and most people never even notice. Marcus watched the bird, suddenly aware of the marvel she was describing. He'd lived in this penthouse for 5 years, had stood on this balcony hundreds of times, and had never once looked up to see what was flying past. He'd been so focused on his empire at ground level that he'd missed entire worlds existing just above him. It's extraordinary, he said quietly. Yes, Sophia agreed, and when he lowered the binoculars and looked at her, he found her watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Yes, it is. They stood there in comfortable silence as the sun rose higher, painting the city in shades of gold. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd simply stood still like this, not working, not planning, just existing in a moment. It felt foreign and strangely compelling. Your wife worries about you, Sophia said eventually. The spell broke. Marcus's expression hardened. Eleanor worries about appearances. There's a difference. Is there? Sophia pulled the blanket tighter. From what I can see, she worries about you specifically. She mentioned you don't sleep enough, that you work 18-hour days, that you haven't taken a vacation in 7 years. Eleanor doesn't know me well enough to worry, Marcus said flatly. Ours is a business arrangement. She gets what she wants, social standing, financial security, freedom to pursue her charity work. I get what I want, political connections, a presentable partner for social functions. It's an honest transaction. Sophia was quiet for a moment. That sounds incredibly lonely. It's practical. It can be both. Marcus turned to face her fully. Why are you here, Sophia? In New York, Eleanor mentioned research, but she was vague. I'm writing a book, Sophia said, about urban conservation, how cities can coexist with wildlife instead of destroying it. I'm using New York as a case study. But I'm also here because my sister asked me to be. She doesn't say it, but I know she's unhappy. I thought maybe my presence might, I don't know, help somehow. Help her or help me? Maybe both, Sophia said, meeting his gaze steadily. Eleanor loves you, you know. Whatever arrangement you think you have, whatever contract you signed, she loves you. She's just too proud to admit it, and you're too closed off to see it. Marcus felt anger flash through him, sharp and defensive. You've been here a week. You don't know anything about our marriage or what we feel. You're right, Sophia said calmly. I don't. But I know loneliness when I see it. Marcus, I've spent years in remote places, often alone by choice. But even in the middle of nowhere, I've never felt as isolated as I imagine you must feel, surrounded by millions of people in this city. She was too perceptive, this woman with her kind eyes and honest words. She saw too much, and Marcus had spent years ensuring no one could see him at all. I should go, he said abruptly. I have meetings. Of course you do, Sophia said. But there was no judgment in her voice, only understanding, which somehow made it worse. As he dressed for work, Marcus tried to shake off the conversation, but her words clung to him like cobwebs. Eleanor loved him?
Impossible.
Eleanor barely knew him. They were strangers who shared an address and a last name. That was all they'd ever been, all they'd ever agreed to be. But that night, when he came home, he found himself noticing things he'd overlooked before. The way Eleanor had his favorite coffee waiting in the morning, even though he rarely acknowledged it. The way she'd arranged his schedule to ensure he had time to eat, even though he often ignored her efforts. Small gestures he'd dismissed as part of their arrangement suddenly seemed like something more. He found Eleanor in her study, working on proposals for her latest charity initiative. She looked up when he knocked, surprise evident on her face. "Marcus? Is something wrong?" "No," he said, feeling awkward, uncertain. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For the coffee. For managing my schedule. For—" He trailed off, not sure how to articulate what he meant. Eleanor set down her pen, studying him with guarded eyes. "You've been talking to Sophia. She mentioned you worry about me." A bitter smile crossed Eleanor's face. "I worry about a lot of things I have no control over. You're one of them, Eleanor." "Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Please don't. I know what our marriage is, Marcus. I knew it from the beginning. I'm not asking you to change the terms. I'm not asking for anything. I made peace with this a long time ago." "Did you?" Marcus asked quietly. "Because it doesn't look like peace from where I'm standing." Eleanor's composure cracked, just slightly. "What do you want me to say? That I hoped for more? That I was naive enough to think maybe we could build something real despite the circumstances? Fine, I did hope for that. But I learned better. You taught me better." The words hit harder than Marcus expected. He'd never considered that Eleanor might have wanted more, that his coldness might have been a response to something she offered rather than the cause of her distance. "I should go," Eleanor said, standing. "I have a dinner meeting with the foundation board." She left before he could respond, and Marcus stood alone in her study, surrounded by evidence of a life he'd never bothered to see. Photos of her charity work, thank you letters from people she'd helped, certificates and awards. Eleanor Ashford was a good person trying to make a difference, and he'd reduced her to a transaction. He found Sophia in the kitchen making tea. She looked up when he entered, reading something in his expression. Rough conversation. You could say that. Marcus leaned against the counter. "You're very good at unsettling people's lives." "Am I?" Sophia poured 2 cups, sliding one toward him. "I prefer to think I'm good at asking the questions people are afraid to ask themselves." "Same thing." Maybe she sipped her tea. "So what are you going to do about it?" "About what?" "About Eleanor. About your marriage. About the fact that you're both miserable and too stubborn to admit it." Marcus picked up the cup but didn't drink. "What would you suggest?" "Talk to her. Really talk to her. Not about schedules or social obligations, but about the real things. What you want, what she wants, what this marriage could be if you both stopped hiding behind your contracts and your pride. And if it's too late, if we've gone too far down this road." Sophia set down her cup, her expression serious. "Then at least you'll know. At least you'll have tried. Isn't that better than spending the rest of your life wondering?" Marcus met her gaze, those golden brown eyes that saw too much and somehow made him want to be better. "When did you become so wise?" "Years of watching animals," she said with a small smile. "They're much more honest than humans. A wolf that's lonely doesn't pretend to prefer solitude. A bird that's lost doesn't pretend to know the way. Maybe we'd all be better off if we could be that honest with ourselves." Over the following weeks, Marcus tried. He came home for dinner more often, engaged in actual conversations with Eleanor, asked about her work instead of just approving the checks she requested for her charities. It was awkward at first, years of distance not easily bridged, but slowly, they began to find a rhythm. But even as he worked to repair things with Eleanor, Marcus found his thoughts increasingly occupied by Sophia. She was like no one he'd ever met, completely herself, uninterested in his money or status, passionate about things that had nothing to do with profit margins or social climbing. She would spend hours telling him about monarch butterfly migrations or the importance of bee populations, and he found himself genuinely interested, not because the topics mattered to his business but because her enthusiasm was infectious. He was falling for her. The realization came late one night as he sat in his office, ostensibly reviewing contracts but actually replaying a conversation from dinner where Sophia had laughed at something he'd said. Really laughed, her whole face lighting up. He was falling for his wife's sister, and it was the worst possible thing that could happen. Marcus Ashford, who prided himself on control, who had built an empire on calculated decisions and emotional detachment, was losing his grip on both. He wanted to talk to Sophia about everything, to hear her perspective on his deals and decisions, to see her eyes light up when she explained some aspect of the natural world. He wanted to stand on the balcony with her every morning watching birds. He wanted things he had no right to want, and the wanting was destroying him. He began avoiding her, staying later at the office, leaving earlier in the morning. If he didn't see her, he could control these feelings. If he didn't hear her voice or see her smile, he could remember why he'd built these walls in the first place. But Sophia noticed. He was working in his home office late one evening when she knocked on his door. He almost told her to go away, but something in him couldn't refuse her. Come in. She entered, closing the door behind her. She looked serious, concerned. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy. Marcus, she said, and the way she said his name made his chest tighten. Don't lie to me. You're good at lying to everyone else, but don't lie to me. What do you want me to say, Sophia? The truth. She moved closer, standing on the other side of his desk. Whatever it is, just tell me the truth. Marcus stood, needing the distance, needing to move. The truth is complicated. The truth usually is. He turned to face her, and the words came out before he could stop them. The truth is that you've disrupted everything. The truth is that I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting to hear what you think about everything from business ethics to bird migrations. The truth is that I look forward to coming home now, and I haven't looked forward to anything in years. The truth is that I'm falling for you, and it's wrong, and I don't know how to make it stop. Sophia stood very still, her expression unreadable. Marcus. I know, he said harshly. I know it's wrong. You're Eleanor's sister. I'm married. This is exactly the kind of thing I've always despised in others. Weakness, lack of control, letting emotions compromise everything. I know all of this. Do you know how I feel? Sophia asked quietly. Marcus looked at her, afraid of the answer. No. I feel the same way, she said, and his world tilted. I've been falling for you since that first morning on the balcony. Maybe even before that. I told myself it was wrong, that I should leave, that I was betraying Eleanor. But the truth is, Marcus, I've never felt this way about anyone. And I don't know what to do about it either. They stared at each other across the office, the admission hanging between them like a live wire. Marcus felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, one step away from falling or pulling back to safety. We can't, he said finally. Eleanor. I know, Sophia said, pain evident in her voice. I know. Eleanor is my sister. Your wife. This can't happen. Then what do we do? I don't know, Sophia admitted, but I think I need to leave. I think staying here is only going to make this worse. Marcus nodded, even though everything in him wanted to protest. When? Soon. I'll tell Eleanor I need to return to my field work early. She'll understand. Will she? Sophia smiled sadly. Probably not, but it's better than the alternative. She turned to leave, but Marcus spoke again. Sophia? She paused, looking back. Thank you, he said, for being honest, for seeing me, for making me want to be better. Whatever happens, thank you for that. Tears glistened in her eyes. You are better, Marcus. You just needed someone to help you remember. After she left, Marcus stood alone in his office, feeling more lost than he'd ever felt building his empire from nothing. He'd spent his entire adult life avoiding emotional entanglements, and now he was caught in the worst possible one. But something Sophia had said kept echoing in his mind. Eleanor is your wife. Not Eleanor is my sister, but Eleanor is your wife. As if that were the primary concern, the relationship that mattered most. For the first time, Marcus found himself actually thinking about his marriage not as a contract but as a commitment to another person. Eleanor, who had stayed despite his coldness. Eleanor, who had hoped for more and been disappointed. Eleanor, who loved him according to her sister, even though he'd given her nothing to love. What kind of man had he become? What kind of husband? The next morning, before he could overthink it, Marcus asked Eleanor to meet him for breakfast. She arrived looking wary, as if expecting bad news. "What's this about?" she asked, sitting across from him at the small table in the breakfast nook. "I want to talk," Marcus said. "Really talk. About us. About our marriage. About everything we've been avoiding for 3 years." Eleanor's guard went up immediately. "Why now?" "Because I've been a coward," Marcus said bluntly. "Because I've been hiding behind our contract and my own fear, and I'm tired of it. Because your sister is planning to leave, and I think it's because she's seen something in this house that we've both been pretending doesn't exist." "What did she see?" "Two people who could have something real but are too scared to try." Marcus leaned forward. "Eleanor, I'm not good at this. I don't know how to be vulnerable or open or any of the things a good husband should be. But I want to try. If you're willing, I want to try to turn this arrangement into an actual marriage." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you saying this now? After 3 years of nothing, why now?" "Because Sophia made me see what I've been throwing away. Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have had. Because," he paused, forcing himself to be honest. "Where is this coming from?" Eleanor asked, searching his face. "What changed?" Marcus hesitated. He could lie, could pretend this was just about seeing Eleanor differently. But Sophia had taught him the value of honesty, even when it hurt. "I developed feelings for Sophia," he said, and felt Eleanor's hands tense in his. "I'm telling you this because you deserve the truth, and because those feelings made me realize what I've been missing with you. I'm not proud of it, Eleanor, but it made me understand that I'm capable of feeling more than I thought I was. And if I can feel that way about Sophia after a few weeks, then surely I can build something real with you. Someone I've known for 3 years. Someone who's been patient and kind despite having every reason not to be." Eleanor pulled her hands back, her expression a mix of hurt and anger and something else he couldn't identify. "You're telling me you fell for my sister, and somehow that's supposed to make me want to try with you?" "No," Marcus said. "I'm telling you that I recognized those feelings for what they were, a wake-up call. I'm telling you that nothing happened between Sophia and me, and nothing will happen, because I want to put that energy and attention into building something with you. I'm telling you the truth because you deserve honesty, not pretty lies." "Does she feel the same way?" Eleanor asked, her voice tight. "She did," Marcus admitted. "That's why she's leaving. We both recognized that what we were feeling was wrong, and we're both choosing to walk away from it. She's choosing to protect you, Eleanor, and I'm choosing to fight for us." Eleanor stood, pacing to the window. Marcus waited, letting her process, his heart pounding. He'd just confessed to emotional infidelity to his wife while asking for a real chance at their marriage. It was possibly the most honest and most stupid thing he'd ever done. "I don't know if I can do this," Eleanor said finally, her back still to him. "I don't know if I can trust you. And I definitely don't know if I can have my sister in this house, knowing you two have feelings for each other." "That's fair," Marcus said. "All of that is fair. I'm not asking you to trust me immediately. I'm asking for a chance to earn it. And as for Sophia, she's already planning to leave. She made that decision before I even talked to you." Eleanor turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Why couldn't you have wanted this 3 years ago? Why did it take you falling for someone else to even see me?" "I don't have a good answer for that," Marcus said, standing and moving toward her carefully. "Except that I was broken in ways I didn't even understand. My mother abandoned me, my father destroyed himself, and I learned to associate caring about people with pain. I built walls so high I couldn't see over them anymore. But Sophia didn't try to scale those walls or break them down. She just sat on the other side and talked to me like I was a person worth knowing. And that made me realize you've been trying to do the same thing for 3 years, and I've been too blind to see it. Eleanor studied his face, and he forced himself to stand still, to let her see everything. The regret, the hope, the fear. I need time, she said finally. I need time to think about this, to figure out if I even want to try. And I need Sophia to leave. I can't deal with both of you here while I'm trying to process all of this. Whatever you need, Marcus agreed. Take all the time you need. Eleanor nodded and left the room, leaving Marcus alone with the wreckage of his confession and the faint hope that maybe, somehow, they could build something from it. Sophia left 3 days later. Marcus made sure to be at the office when she departed, unable to trust himself to say goodbye without making things worse. But she left him a note, which he found on his desk that evening. Marcus. It read in her flowing handwriting. Thank you for being honest with Eleanor. It was the right thing to do, even though I know it was hard. I'm going back to Costa Rica, back to my tree frogs and my research, back to a life that makes sense. But I want you to know something. What I felt for you was real, and I don't regret it. It woke something up in both of us, and I think we both needed that wake-up call. But Eleanor is who you're meant to be with. I saw it even before you did. The way you both orbit each other, the way she knows your coffee order and you know her schedule, the way you fit together despite doing everything you could not to. Don't waste the chance you've been given. Don't let fear win again. Be brave enough to love her, Marcus. She deserves it, and so do you. Take care of yourself. Take care of her. And maybe, someday, when enough time has passed and wounds have healed, we can all be family the way we should have been from the start. With love and hope for your future, Sophia. Marcus read the note 3 times, then folded it carefully and locked it in his desk drawer. She was right, of course. Sophia had a way of being right about things he didn't want to admit. But being right didn't make it any easier. The weeks that followed were difficult. Eleanor was distant but not cold, thoughtful but not open. They circled each other carefully, both trying to figure out if there was anything worth saving between them. Marcus canceled unnecessary meetings, came home for dinner, asked about her day and actually listened to the answers. Small things, basic things, things he should have been doing all along. One evening, about a month after Sophia had left, Eleanor found him on the balcony with binoculars, scanning the sky. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "Warblers," Marcus said. "Sophia said they migrate through this time of year. I thought I might try to spot some." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "You miss her." "I miss who I was becoming when she was here," Marcus corrected. "Someone who noticed things beyond balance sheets and board meetings. Someone who cared about birds and ecosystems and things that don't generate profit." "You can still be that person," Eleanor said softly. "That's not dependent on her being here." "I know," Marcus lowered the binoculars and turned to face his wife. "But it's dependent on me choosing to be that person. Every day. And that's harder than I expected." Eleanor moved to stand beside him, taking the binoculars. "Show me what to look for." So he did, describing what Sophia had taught him about migration patterns and bird identification, feeling awkward at first but growing more comfortable as Eleanor asked questions and genuinely seemed interested. They stood together as the sun set, watching the sky, and it felt like a beginning. "I think I want to try," Eleanor said eventually, still looking through the binoculars. "I think I want to see if we can build something real. But Marcus, if you hurt me again, if you retreat back into that cold, distant person you were, I'm done. I won't give you another chance." "That's fair," Marcus said. "More than fair." She lowered the binoculars and looked at him. "I need you to understand something. I don't want grand gestures or expensive gifts or public displays. I want you to come home. I want you to talk to me. I want you to let me in. That's what I've always wanted." "I can do that," Marcus said, and meant it. "Can you?" Eleanor challenged. "Can you really? because it means being vulnerable. It means admitting when you're scared or uncertain. It means letting me see all the broken parts you've been hiding. Marcus thought about that, about all the walls he'd built, all the defenses he'd erected. Dismantling them would be terrifying, but keeping them up meant staying alone, and he was tired of being alone. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know if I can do all of that perfectly, but I want to try. Will that be enough? Eleanor considered this, really considered it, and finally nodded. It's a start. They began slowly, carefully, like people learning to walk after a long illness. Marcus started seeing a therapist, something he never thought he'd do, working through the abandonment issues and defensive mechanisms that had shaped his entire adult life. Eleanor joined him for some sessions, and they talked about things they'd never discussed. Expectations and disappointments, hopes and fears, the reality of their marriage versus the fantasy they'd each held. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and arguments. Nights when Marcus wanted to retreat to his office and old patterns. Days when Eleanor questioned whether this was worth the effort. But they kept trying, kept showing up, kept choosing each other even when it was hard. Marcus learned to express affection in small ways. A hand on Eleanor's shoulder when he passed, asking how her meeting went, actually taking days off to spend time with her. Eleanor learned to trust again, slowly opening the parts of herself she'd closed off after years of rejection. 6 months after Sophia left, they took a vacation together. A real one, where Marcus turned off his phone and didn't check email for an entire week. They went to a small island in Greece, far from the business world and social obligations. It was just the two of them, sun and sea and long conversations that meandered from the profound to the mundane. One evening, they sat on their private balcony, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in shades of orange and pink. Eleanor leaned against Marcus, his arm around her shoulders, and it felt natural in a way it never had before. I got an email from Sophia, Eleanor said. She wants to know if she can visit for Christmas. She says she understands if the answer is no. Marcus felt his chest tighten at the mention of her name, but it wasn't the same sharp longing he'd felt months ago. It was softer now, more like nostalgia for a road not taken than active yearning for what couldn't be. What do you want? He asked. I want my sister back, Eleanor said. I miss her. And I think enough time has passed that maybe we can all be in the same room without it being unbearably awkward. Then tell her yes, Marcus said. Tell her we'd love to have her. Eleanor pulled back to look at him. Are you sure? Are you over it? Marcus considered the question carefully. I think over it might be too strong, but I'm not in love with her anymore, if that's what you're asking. What I felt for Sophia was real, but it was also a catalyst. It forced me to confront things I'd been avoiding. In a way, I'll always be grateful to her for that. But what I feel for you, Eleanor, that's what I'm choosing to build. That's what I want for the rest of my life. Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. I love you, Marcus. I know I've said it before, but I mean it differently now. I love the person you're becoming. I love the man who watches birds on the balcony and takes vacations and goes to therapy. I love that you're trying, even when it's hard. I love you too, Marcus said, and realized it was true. Not the passionate, overwhelming feeling he'd had for Sophia, but something deeper and more sustainable. A love built on choice and effort and commitment, on seeing someone's flaws and choosing them anyway. I love you, and I want to build a life with you. A real life, not just an arrangement. They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and it felt like a promise. Christmas came, and with it, Sophia. She arrived at the penthouse looking tanned and healthy, her dark hair longer than before, her smile as bright as Marcus remembered. But when he saw her, he felt only warmth and affection, the kind you'd feel for a good friend or a cherished sister-in-law. The sharp wanting was gone, replaced by genuine fondness and gratitude. Marcus, she said, hugging him carefully, you look good, happy. I am, he said, and meant it. Welcome home. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen, and the sisters embraced for a long moment. Marcus saw tears in both their eyes, saw the relief and love and forgiveness passing between them without words. I'm sorry, Sophia said softly, for everything. for coming here and disrupting your lives and— Stop, Eleanor interrupted. You have nothing to apologize for. If anything, I should be thanking you. You gave us a gift, even if it didn't feel like one at the time. They spent the week together, the three of them, and it was surprisingly easy. Sophia told stories about her research in Costa Rica, about howler monkeys and poison dart frogs and the locals who'd adopted her as one of their own. Marcus shared how his therapy was going, how he was learning to recognize his patterns and make different choices. Eleanor talked about expanding her foundation, about ambitious new projects she was planning. One morning, Marcus found Sophia alone on the balcony, binoculars trained on the sky just as she'd been that first morning months ago. See anything good? He asked, joining her. A red-tailed hawk, she said, pointing. They're becoming more common in cities as they adapt to urban environments. It's actually a conservation success story. Marcus watched the hawk soaring above the buildings, magnificent and free. Thank you, he said quietly. Sophia lowered the binoculars. For what? For being the catalyst I needed. For being honest even when it was hard. For leaving when staying would have been easier. For coming back now, when we're ready. I didn't do anything special, Marcus. I was just myself. Exactly, he said. You showed me that being yourself was possible. That vulnerability wasn't weakness. That caring about things didn't make you a target. I'd forgotten all of that, if I ever knew it at all. Sophia smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand briefly. You were never as hard as you pretended to be. You just needed someone to show you it was safe to be soft sometimes. That someone is Eleanor now, Marcus said. I know, and I'm glad. She's been in love with you since the day she met you, you know. Even when she agreed to the arrangement, even when she pretended it was just practical. She loved you. How did you know? Because I'm her sister, Sophia said simply. Because I know how she looks at things she loves. And she's always looked at you like that, even when you couldn't see it. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. Am I interrupting? Never, Marcus said, extending his hand to her. She came to join them, fitting perfectly under his arm. Sophia was just telling me about the hawk. It felt right somehow, past and present and future all existing in this moment, all the pain and growth and change leading to this. A family, complicated and imperfect, but real. As January turned to February, Sophia returned to her research, but this time there were regular video calls and plans for visits. The wound had healed, scar tissue forming but not limiting movement. Marcus and Eleanor continued building their marriage, day by day, choice by choice. Marcus transformed in ways he never expected. He started a foundation focused on urban conservation, working with Sophia remotely on initiatives to make cities more wildlife-friendly. He implemented bird-safe glass in all his buildings, created green roofs, established urban wildlife corridors. His board thought he'd lost his mind, but the projects generated positive press and actually increased property values, proving that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. He learned to delegate more at work, to trust his team, to recognize that his worth wasn't measured only in hours worked or deals closed. He took weekends off. He and Eleanor traveled, not to luxury resorts but to national parks and conservation sites, places where they could hike and watch wildlife and remember that the world was bigger than their problems. 2 years after that first Christmas reunion, Eleanor told him she was pregnant. Marcus felt terror and joy in equal measure. Terror that he'd be like his parents, that he'd fail this child the way they'd failed him, and joy at the thought of creating a family with Eleanor, of having a chance to do it right. Their daughter was born on a crisp autumn morning. 8 pounds of squalling, perfect humanity that Marcus fell in love with the moment he saw her. They named her Sophia Eleanor, honoring both the woman who'd catalyzed their transformation and the one who'd been patient enough to see it through. Sophia, the original Sophia, flew in from whatever remote corner of the world she was working in, bearing gifts made by local artisans and stories that would one day become bedtime tales. She held her namesake with tears in her eyes, and Marcus saw Eleanor watching them, saw the love and forgiveness and deep sisterly bond that had not only survived but strengthened. She's perfect, Sophia whispered, looking up at Marcus and Eleanor. You two made something perfect. We made something real, Marcus corrected. Perfect is overrated. As the years passed, Marcus barely recognized the man he'd been. The cold, distant billionaire who'd measured everything in dollars and saw people as assets or liabilities was gone, replaced by someone warmer, more connected, more alive. He still worked hard, that drive never fully disappeared, but work was no longer his entire identity. He coached his daughter's soccer team. He attended every school play and parent-teacher conference. He took family vacations where they hiked and explored and learned together. He maintained his friendship with Sophia, who remained single by choice, married to her work, visiting several times a year and filling their home with laughter and impossible stories from her adventures. On quiet mornings, Marcus still went to the balcony with binoculars, watching the sky for migrating birds. Sometimes Eleanor joined him, sometimes young Sophia did, sometimes he stood alone. But he was never lonely anymore. He'd learned that being alone and being lonely were different things, and that he'd spent years confusing the two. One morning, 10 years after that first conversation on the balcony, Marcus stood watching the sunrise when Eleanor joined him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How different things are," Marcus said. "How different I am. Sometimes I can barely remember being that person. The one who thought emotions were weaknesses and caring about people was dangerous. Do you miss him? That version of yourself?" Marcus considered it. No. He was powerful but empty. He had everything but nothing that mattered. "I'd rather be who I am now, flawed and vulnerable and trying, than go back to being invulnerable and alone." "Good," Eleanor said, leaning into him, "because I quite like who you are now." They stood together in comfortable silence as the city woke up around them. Millions of lives beginning new days, birds migrating overhead, the eternal dance of people and nature finding ways to coexist. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here, the pain and growth, the mistakes and corrections, the moment he'd seen Sophia and felt something crack open in his chest. He didn't regret that feeling, even though nothing had come of it romantically, because that feeling had been the beginning of his transformation. The first crack in walls he'd spent decades building. It had hurt, had been messy and complicated and potentially devastating. But it had also been necessary. Sometimes Marcus thought you needed to almost lose everything to realize what you actually wanted to keep. You needed to feel the wrong kind of love to recognize the right kind when it was offered. You needed to break before you could heal properly. "I love you," he said to Eleanor. Not for the first time and not for the last, but meaning it more deeply with each repetition. "I love you too," she replied. "Thank you for choosing me, for choosing us." "Every day," Marcus promised. "Every single day." And he meant it, because that was the secret he'd learned. Love wasn't something that happened to you, wasn't something you fell into and then stayed in effortlessly. Love was a choice you made repeatedly, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. It was showing up and being present and trying to be better than you were yesterday. Inside, their daughter was waking up, and soon the house would fill with the chaos of breakfast and preparing for school and all the mundane magic of family life. Marcus had a full day ahead, meetings and decisions and the constant demands of running a business empire. But he'd also blocked off his calendar for Sophia's evening soccer game, and he'd promised Eleanor they'd have date night this weekend. His life was full now, not with work and acquisition and the endless pursuit of more, but with people and connection and moments that mattered. He'd learned to measure wealth differently, not in dollars but in time spent with people he loved, in conservation projects that would outlast him, in the legacy he was building with Eleanor and for their daughter. Marcus Ashford had been hateful and cold, had pushed away everyone who tried to get close, had built fortress walls around a heart he'd thought was invulnerable. But hearts aren't meant to be invulnerable. They're meant to break and heal and grow stronger in the broken places. They're meant to feel and hurt and love and keep loving even when it's terrifying. That morning on the balcony, watching birds migrate across a lightning sky with his wife beside him and his daughter sleeping safely inside, Marcus finally understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. And it had nothing to do with the billions in his accounts and everything to do with the people who'd helped him remember how to be human. The story could have ended differently. He could have pursued Sophia, destroyed his marriage, lost Eleanor's trust forever. Or he could have retreated back into his walls, refused to change, lived out his days in comfortable isolation. But he'd made different choices, harder choices, and those choices had led him here. Here, where the morning was beautiful and his family was safe and his heart, once so carefully guarded, was open and full and finally free.